This is the first of two modules on protectionism. This one will cover tariffs. Here we see the market for paint. We have our three panels that you should be familiar with by now. You have home. We're going to make the assumption that home's a small country. That assumption is probably not too meaningful to you yet, but it will become more meaningful when we get into large country analysis. So we got the home market, downward sloping demand curve, upward sloping supply curve, and price and autarky. We got the row market, upward sloping supply curve, downward sloping demand curve. We got price and autarky star. These stars just mean that we're talking about the row market there. That just differentiates us from the home market. Then you get the international market, so the downward sloping demand for imports, DM, right? The stepping off point is at PA, so you step off there, and then you go down by this distance every time you lower the price. And then upward sloping supply curve, the stepping off point is PA star, so you go up from there and you find a point and then of equilibrium between these two, and then that's imports. So that many units of paint would be moved from this country to this country, and that distance, not by coincidence, is that distance. If you drew it right, this is not to scale, and it's also that distance. Okay, that's just a refresher there. So let's see what's happened here with our welfare analysis. Before, we know that this was consumer surplus and these two pieces were producer surplus, and now that we've opened up to free trade, well, producer surplus has really gotten a lot smaller. It's that tiny little triangle right in there, right? Society's better because consumers picked up this piece, and some of this from producers, and then still have all of that, so they get that big triangle, but producers get this tiny little triangle. Well, of course they're going to be upset by that, so they're going to lobby to their government to protect them, and their government might do that by enacting a tariff. So let's say we have a tariff, and we've studied, tariff's got one R, we've studied tariffs already, and we know that they could be ad valorem or per unit. Let's say we have a per unit tariff, and so maybe a government comes in and says, for every unit of paint you bring from this country to this country, you got to pay us $1. Okay, so how do you model that? Well, you would draw a line $1 higher than PW, whatever that was. If that was $5, you'd find $6, and you draw a line right across here, and that's going to be called PT. Okay, so if that's PT, then we can see what's happened to imports, and we can keep this line going, PT, at least as far as that, right? And then we find at this higher price, well, I'm going to call that M prime, the number of units imported gets smaller. No longer do we import that many units, we import that many units, right? So if that's true, well, then that's that distance right there. That distance equals that distance right there, and we can do our welfare analysis and see what all of our pieces show us, right? So this piece here is now consumer surplus after the tariff. They get all of that, right? They used to get that, but they don't get that anymore. What happens to producer surplus? Well, producers used to get this piece in free trade. They didn't like that because that's really small. So what have they done? They've picked up this piece. So producers are better off because of the tariffs. Consumers are worse off because of the tariffs. And then let's see what's left. What happened to these pieces? Well, that distance right there, which is M prime, right? That's how many units are being imported from row into home. That distance right there winds up becoming tariff revenue. Okay, tariff revenue is in green, and we know this is how much money the government would collect from this tariff because it's M prime units wide, so maybe that's like, call it 3 units. 3 units of paint are brought over, and that's the tariff. Let's call that $1. Well, 3 times $1 is $3. And if the government says every unit you bring over you have to pay us $1, and they bring 3 units over, that's $3. That's $3. So that would be the value of the tariff, or tariff revenue is what we call that. Then you get these two other pieces in here. And what are they? Well, I'm going to color them red because I'm out of colored pens, but I'll make them solid red. You get the first triangle, which is this one, and you get the second triangle, which is this one. And both of those are dead weight loss. Dead weight loss. Dead weight loss. And we can distinguish them a little bit further because the one on the inside here, the one on the left, is called production distortion. These are units, that many units, that would have been produced in row in free trade, but now they're produced in home less efficiently because home's not as good at producing them as row is. So we call that production distortion. Production's been distorted from being produced where it should be based on comparative advantage to now being produced at home because of protectionism. And then there's this piece over here, and we call that consumer distortion. These are units that would have been purchased in free trade if prices were lower all the way down at PW, but now that prices are higher at PT, they weren't purchased at all. So really they never happened. No one would buy those, no one would get any enjoyment out of it. So after we have a tariff, we can see what winds up happening. Consumers, they lose relative to free trade. Consumer surplus, that triangle is smaller. Producers, they win relative to free trade because the producer surplus triangle is a little bit larger here. The government, the home government wins because of the tariff because they pick up that tariff revenue, and then society as a whole loses, and we could quantify if we wanted to how much they would lose by just getting the area of these two triangles. We're not going to do that here, but we could theoretically do that. So that is how we wind up modeling a tariff in a two-country, one-good model.